Would you like to learn how to use your Pluto SDR software-defined radio to run OpenWebRX directly without having to use a third-party computer or a Raspberry Pi to run the software? Well, if so, don't go anywhere, because today on Signals Everywhere, I'll be teaching you how to run PlutoWeb, the amazing piece of open-source third-party firmware for your Pluto SDR that will let you run not only OpenWebRX, but many other applications as well. Today's video is sponsored by our patron sponsor of the day, Harvey Harmel. I wanted to give you a big shout out for helping support the channel and move things forward here at Signals Everywhere. And of course, all my Patreon subscribers and YouTube subscribers, you are the ones who make this channel possible, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. So without further ado, let's go ahead and install PlutoWeb. This is an amazing piece of free open source software that's going to get you running OpenWebRX, among other things, on your Pluto SDR. First thing we need to do is head over to the website here, link in the description below, of course, and you're going to have to go down to your Releases tab here, and we're going to grab the source code for the newest version of the PlutoWeb software, and I'm going to go ahead and just save that to the desktop here. Once that is completed downloading, we need to extract it and begin installing our firmware to our Pluto SDR. So here we have our PlutoWeb zip file here. I'm just going to open this up. And we need to go into the PlutoWeb folder under Images, and we need to get the boot FRM and Pluto FRM files. These are going to be used to update the firmware. Now, they also recommend to use the DFU files on your first install, but I didn't really need to do that, and so in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and use the FRM files. I'm going to copy these to my desktop because they do need to be extracted before we can flash them onto our Pluto software-defined radio. So now what I'm going to do is just restart my Pluto SDR here, and there it is. And so we're going to go ahead and open the folder to view files, and if you don't see this, just go ahead and open up any folder here. You'll go over to computer and find your Pluto SDR. Now in this case, this is not a stock SDR. This has a previous version of the firmware on it, but the process is exactly the same. I'm going to go ahead and update my software in the process of showing you how to flash it. So the first thing you need to do is take your boot.frm file, and we're just going to go ahead and move that into the main directory of your Pluto SDR. Once you've done that, we need to come down here to the little arrow on Windows, right-click on our safety USB plug here, and we're going to come down to the Eject Pluto Sdr with the drive letter next to it, not the Atom Pluto above it. Make sure it's the one with the drive letter to the right of it. We're going to go ahead and eject the Pluto SDR, and this will begin flashing the boot FRM file to our Pluto SDR. Once it's completed, the Pluto SDR should restart, and we will again be prompted to open up the files and folders, so that way we can move on to the next process of flashing the Pluto FRM file itself. During this process, the LED 1 on your Pluto will flash rapidly. Make sure you do not turn off the power to your Pluto SDR during this process, or you may risk potentially bricking the device. Here you can see I now have the option to autoplay the Pluto again. I'm going to open this up, and I'm now going to move the Pluto FRM file into the Pluto SDR folder itself. We'll give that a moment to copy over, and then again come down to our little arrow on Windows, right click on the USB option here, and again eject the Pluto SDR with the drive letter to the right. Once you've done that, the Pluto will again restart. Now this time, this is a much larger file that is flashing an entire file system onto your Pluto SDR. This is going to take a while. Give it about 5-10 minutes. Don't interrupt your Pluto, because if you interrupt this flashing process, you could run into some problems, and I don't want you to have to go through the process of attempting to restore it if you don't have to. So we're going to go ahead and wait for that to do its thing, and as soon as it pops back up, I'll show you how we can get into the OpenWebRX interface and PlutoWeb itself, so we can start doing some really cool stuff with it. Alright, so after a grueling probably 10 minutes in my case, we now have our option to open up the Pluto SDR again, and you can see that some changes have been made in the folder here. And so now finally, we can get into the Pluto Web Interface. Let's go ahead and open up Chrome. So here we have the Pluto Web user interface, and the main thing I want to focus on today is OpenWebRX, because it seems to be developed the most on this particular Pluto Web application. And this is what I showed you guys in the introduction to our video, but it also supports things like Dump 1090 for aircraft tracking, although at the moment, because Google Maps now charges for the API, that functionality is crippled, and I guess they're still working on fixing that. But there's also LeanTRX for transmitting and receiving DVB-S television. They have not yet implemented a video decoder, but I cannot wait to see that work because it's going to be phenomenal to do some work using these as a 70cm amateur television portable DVB decoder. So hopefully they do that soon and I can make a video on it for you guys. And then finally we have Soapy Remote, which is great if you want to use software like CubicSDR that typically is not compatible with your PlutoSDR, but it is compatible with Soapy Remote. So if you want to see a video on that, leave me a comment below the video here so I can get that put together for you. So here I want to show you just a quick overview of how to get OpenWebRX to work. It's fairly straightforward. We have to enter our center frequency, which is the frequency we will focus on, as well as our starting frequency. And this is all in hertz. So if you're not familiar with this, 1,000 hertz is a kilohertz, 1,000 kilohertz is a megahertz, and 1,000 megahertz is a gigahertz. And if you can't remember that, just Google 855 megahertz in hertz, and Google will give you the answer. Pretty straightforward. Here I'm going to enter 855, 3 zeros, and then another 3 zeros. That is going to be 855 megahertz, and then below that I have 854 megahertz, and that's just because I have a P25 trunking system roughly in that range, and it'll give me a nice little overview with some activity on the system. Now, these cannot be changed once you start OpenWebRX without restarting it, so keep that in mind when you set up your frequency. You'll have to restart the program each time you want to change that. You don't, however, have to change the modulation type within the main screen here. You can select NFM, AM, lower and upper sideband, or CW even after you've started the application, which is nice. We can also set the sample rate, which is the bandwidth we will be pulling in on OpenWebRX, and then the RF gain, which I'll be leaving alone, and your PPM correction. If your Pluto's receiver is slightly off, you can adjust that here. Finally, without further ado, hit Start OpenWebRX, and we can either click on the link here to just open it up, or what I like to do is right-click and go to Open Link in New Tab, so we get an almost full-screen view of it here. We're going to go ahead and click the Start OpenWebRX. So as you can see on our OpenWebRX application, we had a nice strong signal down the center of the band, but the rest of it just looks dark. And so what we need to do here is actually adjust the waterfall minimum level. If we bring it down a bit, as soon as I let go, it's going to adjust that. And you'll see that it changes the color or the intensity of that waterfall. And you just need to make slight adjustments until you're able to see a nice blue background to your waterfall, so that way when a signal comes up, you can clearly tell it apart from everything else. If you bring it too far to the left, you're going to oversaturate it, and it's just going to look red or orange. You're going to have some problems. And if you bring it too far to the right, you're not going to see any signals at all. So you want to kind of adjust this as you go until you get a nice light blue signal, and that should be just where you want it, so that way you can see any of the strong signals that come in over OpenWebRX on your PlutoSDR. And now, like I said, we can also change this from FM to AM, lower and upper sideband, and CW, all right from the application itself. We can change the volume through the web interface here. We can set a squelch, and that's just going to be the threshold level before audio begins to play over your speakers. So if you want to make sure that the audio is over, say, 83 dB before it begins to play on your speakers, you can do that. I have my speakers muted in this case for the video. And you can also adjust the waterfall maximum level, or the speed of the waterfall here. And so another thing here is going to be actually selecting a signal. So you can just click anywhere on the waterfall, and you'll see this little guy show up here. You can move this around. And this is the signal that you are going to be currently demodulating. So generally, I like to take this little cross and click directly in the center of the signal, and that will ensure that you are centered with your signal, in this case, an FM signal. For lower sideband, you'll see that it kind of moves over in a little chunk here. Same with upper sideband, it's going to switch to the other side, and you'll have to kind of get used to tuning that around upper and lower sideband, but it works fairly well for us. I'm going to switch it back over to FM, and you'll see we also have the option for digital, and unfortunately it only supports BPSK31, which you'll only find in the HF bands. Hopefully they'll add more digital modes in the future. That would be really cool to see, but at the moment it's only BPSK31. And so finally we have our option to zoom in and out sequentially, so just minimal zooms at a time, or we can zoom all the way in or zoom all the way out. And finally, we have this little 3D button here, which will give us that nice little 3D graph that you saw in the beginning of the video. So you can get a nice 3D visualization of what the signals look like instead of just using the traditional waterfall. And if you click it again, we'll go back to that waterfall. So pretty straightforward and easy to use. You can see we have our status down here in the lower left corner, and we can turn these on and off just by clicking on these buttons in the upper right corner. And that's essentially all there is to it as far as OpenWebRX is concerned. So if this video was valuable to you in any way, please hit the like button so I know that you enjoyed the video. If you know anybody else who might be interested in this, please share that video to them so they can take a look for themselves and we can all learn together. And finally, before I let you all go, if you'd like to support the channel, please take a look at signalseverywhere.com/Patreon, where even at the $1 tier, you will all get access to early content from my channel, be that video or podcast, as well as access to the credits of every single video. I'll put your name in the credits, and at random, a name will be selected, and I will shout you out directly on any given video. So you get to help sponsor the channel directly because your contributions, your time matters, and without you, I would not be here. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.